What would you do if, right after you and your friends laughed about your husband being your biggest mistake, a courier arrived at your door with divorce papers and proof of every secret you thought you'd buried? How could things fall apart so fast? Was it all his fault, or did I just never expect consequences for my choices? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The wine glass felt heavy in my hand as I stared at my reflection in the restaurant's mirror-lined wall. At 32, I still looked good. Better than good, actually. My auburn hair caught the ambient lighting perfectly, and my emerald dress hugged curves that childbirth had been surprisingly kind to. So why did I feel so invisible at home? Earth to Zuleika, my friend Jessica's voice cut through my thoughts. We're talking about your situation here. I turned back to our table at Meridian, the trendy downtown restaurant where we'd been meeting for girls' nights for the past 3 years. Jessica, Amanda, and Chloe, my closest friends, or so I thought, were all leaning forward with that particular expression women get when they're about to dissect someone's life. Sorry, I was just thinking about what you said earlier, I replied, taking another sip of the overpriced Pinot Grigio. About Harlan being a complete dead weight, Amanda finished, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her martini glass. Honey, I've been watching you for months. You're withering away in that marriage. Jessica nodded vigorously. When's the last time he surprised you with anything? When's the last time he made you feel like a woman instead of just a mother and housekeeper? I felt my chest tighten with a familiar mix of validation and guilt. These were the conversations I'd been craving, someone finally acknowledging what I'd been feeling for so long. Harlan, my husband of 8 years, had become predictable, boring even. He came home from his teaching job at Roosevelt High, helped with homework, watched his documentaries, and fell asleep by 10. Where was the passion? Where was the excitement? He's not that bad, I said weakly, though even as the words left my mouth, I didn't believe them. Chloe laughed, a sharp sound that made other diners glance our way. Zuleika, you literally called him the human equivalent of watching paint dry last week, and that was before you told us about the birthday thing. My birthday. God, that still stung. Harlan had given me a new vacuum cleaner, a really nice one, he'd emphasized, with all the attachments. He'd genuinely thought I'd love it because I'd mentioned our old one was dying. The look of confusion on his face when I didn't react with enthusiasm still haunted me. A vacuum, Amanda said, shaking her head. For your 32nd birthday. I mean, what's next? A mop for Christmas? He means well, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. He's just practical. Practical is code for boring, Jessica declared, and you're too young and too beautiful to settle for boring. Look at you. You could have any man you wanted. The compliment sent a warm flush through me. When was the last time Harlan had called me beautiful? When was the last time he'd really looked at me, not just glanced up from his stack of math tests to ask if I'd paid the electric bill? Speaking of which, Chloe said with a sly grin, what about that guy from your office? Aaron? Aiden, I corrected automatically, then felt my cheeks heat up. And it's not like that. Oh, please, Amanda scoffed. You light up like a Christmas tree every time his name comes up. And didn't you say he complimented your new haircut? He had. Aiden Sutter, 29 years old and devastatingly charming, had noticed my highlights the day I got them done. He'd said they brought out the gold flecks in my eyes. Harlan hadn't even realized I'd been to the salon until 3 days later. He's just friendly, I said, but I was thinking about the way Aiden's hand had brushed mine when he'd handed me coffee that morning, how he'd held my gaze just a beat longer than necessary. Friendly, Jessica repeated with air quotes. Honey, wake up. A 29-year-old guy doesn't compliment a married woman's hair because he's friendly. He's interested. And why shouldn't he be? Chloe added. You're gorgeous, smart, funny. You deserve someone who appreciates all of that. I have children, I reminded them. Maya and Benji need stability. They need a mother who's happy, Amanda countered. Kids pick up on everything. Do you really think they don't notice the tension between you and Harlan? The question hit too close to home. Maya, my 7-year-old, had asked just last week why Daddy and I didn't laugh together anymore. And Benji, at 10, had started spending more time in his room, claiming he was reading, but really just avoiding the cold politeness that had settled over our house like fog. Look, Jessica said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. We're not saying you should run off with Office Guy tomorrow. We're just saying you deserve to be happy. Life is short, Zuleika. Don't waste it being miserable. Harlan's not a bad person, I said, though I was starting to feel like I was defending a stranger. He's just... Your biggest mistake, Chloe suggested with a laugh. The words hung in the air for a moment. Then Amanda started giggling, and Jessica joined in, and suddenly we were all laughing, me included, at the brutal honesty of it. Oh my God, I gasped between giggles. That's terrible. But true, Jessica pressed. I thought about my life before Harlan. I'd been working at a marketing firm, dating a guy who rode a motorcycle and wrote poetry. Granted, the poetry was terrible, and he'd turned out to be seeing 2 other women, but still, there had been excitement, unpredictability, passion. Then I'd met Harlan at my friend's barbecue. He'd been sweet, stable, reliable. He'd wanted marriage and children and a house with a white picket fence. After the chaos of my early 20s, it had seemed like exactly what I needed. But now I felt like I was suffocating in all that stability. Maybe, I admitted quietly. Maybe you're right. Of course we're right, Amanda said, raising her glass. To Zuleika's awakening. To new beginnings, Chloe added. To finally living your truth, Jessica chimed in. We clinked glasses, and I felt a dangerous thrill run through me. For the first time in years, I felt seen, understood, validated. These women got it. They got me. My phone buzzed against the table. A text from Harlan. We need to talk when you get home. I stared at the message, a cold finger of dread tracing down my spine. The timing felt ominous, like he'd somehow heard our conversation from 20 miles away. Everything okay? Amanda asked, noticing my expression. Just Harlan being Harlan, I said, sliding the phone into my purse. Probably wants to discuss the grocery budget or something equally thrilling. But as we paid the check and said our goodbyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight. Whether it was in me or in some cosmic balance I couldn't see, I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I felt different walking to my car than I had walking into the restaurant. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The house was unusually quiet when I got home at 11:30. Usually, Harlan would be in the living room grading papers or watching one of his history documentaries. But tonight, the TV was dark, and the stack of tests sat untouched on the coffee table. I found him in the kitchen, sitting at our small breakfast table with a cup of tea growing cold in front of him. He looked up when I entered, and I was struck by how tired he looked. When had those lines around his eyes gotten so deep? How was girls' night? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. Fine, I said, hanging my purse on the hook by the door. Just the usual gossip and wine. You said you wanted to talk about something? Harlan studied me for a long moment, and I felt an uncomfortable prickle of awareness. His dark eyes that Maya had inherited, seemed to be cataloguing details. My dress, my makeup, the way I was standing. You look nice, he said finally. That dress is new, isn't it? I've had it for months, I lied smoothly. I'd actually bought it last week, along with the matching shoes that were currently making my feet ache. What did you want to discuss? Just wondering how late these girls' nights have been running lately, he said, taking a sip of his tea. This is the 3rd one this month. The comment felt loaded, accusatory. I bristled automatically. I'm allowed to have friends, Harlan. I'm allowed to have a life outside this house. Of course you are. I just noticed you've been different lately. Distant. Different how? I challenged, crossing my arms. Your phone's always buzzing. You're working late more often. You seem unhappy. The last observation hit too close to home, so I deflected. Maybe I seem unhappy because you never talk to me about anything except schedules and bills. When's the last time we had a real conversation, Harlan? When's the last time you asked me about my dreams, my feelings, my thoughts about anything that matters? He flinched slightly, and I felt a mean little satisfaction. I ask you about your day every... How was work? Doesn't count, I interrupted. That's not a conversation, that's a checklist item. You ask me how work was, I say fine, you nod and go back to your papers. That's not intimacy, Harlan, that's cohabitation. I'm sorry you feel that way, he said quietly. I thought we were partners. I thought we were building something together. We are. We have. The kids, the house, the routine. But what about us? What about the people we were before we became parents and homeowners and responsible adults? Harlan was quiet for a long moment, staring into his tea. The people we were before, he repeated slowly. You mean when you were dating that guy with the motorcycle? The one who cheated on you with half of downtown? The comment stung because it was true, but also because it felt unfair. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Do I? He looked up at me again, and there was something different in his expression, something sharper. Because lately, I'm not sure I know anything about what you mean, or what you want, or who you are for that matter. The accusation hung between us like a challenge. Part of me wanted to reassure him, to bridge the gap that had been widening between us for months. But a larger part, the part that had been fed wine and validation all evening, wanted to push back. Maybe that's because you've never bothered to really look, I said. Maybe you've been so comfortable with your version of me, the good wife, the mother, the woman who's grateful for vacuum cleaners and predictable date nights, that you never noticed I might want something more. Something more, he repeated. Like what? The question felt like a trap, so I turned it back on him. What do you want, Harlan? Really want? If you could have anything in the world, what would it be? I want my family to be happy, he said without hesitation. I want Maya to keep laughing the way she does when we read together. I want Benji to stop hiding in his room. I want my wife to look at me the way she used to, instead of like I'm some stranger who wandered into her life by mistake. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard, and for a moment I felt the familiar tug of affection I'd once felt for this man. But then I remembered Amanda's words. You're withering away in that marriage. Maybe that's the problem, I said. Maybe you want things to stay exactly the same, and I want them to change. Change how? I thought about Aiden's smile, about the way he made me feel interesting and attractive and alive. I don't know yet, but something has to change, Harlan, because this, I gestured around the kitchen, at our life, at us, isn't working for me anymore. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was very soft. I see. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. There was a stillness about him that I'd never seen before, a kind of watchful calm that made me suddenly nervous. I'm going to bed, I said. We can talk more tomorrow if you want. Sure, he said, not moving from the table. Good night, Zuleika. I headed upstairs, but something made me pause at the landing and look back. Harlan was still sitting at the kitchen table, but now he had his phone in his hand and was typing something. His laptop, I noticed, was open beside him, which was odd, since he usually left it in his study. A chill ran down my spine, though I couldn't say why. I went to our bedroom and changed into my pajamas, but when I came back 20 minutes later to get some water, the kitchen was empty. Harlan's teacup was in the sink, his laptop was gone, and I could hear the guest room door closing down the hall. He'd never slept in the guest room before, not once in 8 years of marriage. I lay in our bed, my bed now apparently, staring at the ceiling and replaying the conversation. Had I been too harsh? Had I said too much? But then I thought about Jessica's words. You deserve someone who appreciates all of that. I thought about Aiden's compliments, about the way he really listened when I talked, about how he made me feel like the most fascinating woman in the world. Maybe I did deserve more than this. Maybe I deserved to be happy. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Jules. "How was girls' night? Did you tell them about you-know-who?" I smiled in the darkness. Jules was 28, 4 years younger than me, and she'd always been my biggest cheerleader. She was the only person who knew about my complicated feelings regarding Aiden, and she'd been encouraging me to explore my options for weeks. "They think I deserve better," I texted back. "Because you do. Life is too short to be miserable. Follow your heart. Follow my heart." The phrase echoed in my mind as I finally drifted off to sleep. Maybe it was time I stopped being so practical, so responsible, so concerned with what everyone else needed. Maybe it was time to think about what I wanted for once. The next morning, Harlan was gone before I woke up. He'd left coffee made and lunches packed for the kids, but no note, no text, no acknowledgement of our conversation the night before. It was like he'd simply erased himself from the morning routine. I told myself I was relieved as I got Maya and Benji ready for school, but there was an uncomfortable knot in my stomach that I couldn't quite shake. "Where's Daddy?" Maya asked, looking around the kitchen with her big dark eyes. "He left early for work, sweetheart," I said, braiding her hair. "He'll see you tonight." "Are you and Daddy fighting?" Benji asked quietly, not looking up from his cereal. The question caught me off guard. "Why would you ask that?" "You guys were talking loud last night, and Daddy slept in the guest room. He only does that when he has a cold." "Smart kid. Too smart." "Sometimes adults need space to think about things," I said carefully. "It doesn't mean anything bad." But Benji's expression suggested he wasn't buying it, and Maya's lower lip was starting to tremble. Great. Now I was the mother who was upsetting her children. "Everything's fine," I said more firmly. "Now finish your breakfast or you'll be late." I dropped them off at their respective schools and headed to work, trying to push away the guilt that had settled over me like a heavy blanket. The kids were fine. They were resilient. And maybe some changes would be good for all of us in the long run. Meridian Insurance occupied 3 floors of a glass building downtown, and I'd been working there as an office administrator for 5 years. It wasn't the most exciting job in the world, but it paid well and offered good benefits. More importantly, it was where I'd met Aiden. He was already at his desk when I arrived, looking devastatingly handsome in a navy blue shirt that brought out his eyes. Aiden worked in claims, which meant our departments collaborated frequently. It also meant we had plenty of legitimate reasons to talk. "Morning, beautiful," he said with that easy smile that made my stomach flutter. "You look fantastic today." I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a fitted black dress with a red belt that emphasized my waist. "Thank you," I said, feeling that familiar warm glow of appreciation. "How was your evening?" "Boring," he said, rolling his eyes. "Netflix and leftover pizza. I should have asked what you were up to. Maybe I could have crashed girls' night." The suggestion was clearly a joke, but there was something in his tone that made me wonder. "I don't think my friends would have minded," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Really?" His eyebrows rose. "And what about your husband? Would he have minded?" The question felt loaded with possibility. "Harlan doesn't really involve himself in my social life," I said, which was true enough. "He's not the social type." "His loss," Aiden said, his gaze lingering on my face. "If you were my wife, I'd want to show you off every chance I got." The compliment sent heat rushing through me. When was the last time Harlan had wanted to show me off? When was the last time he'd acted like he was lucky to have me, instead of like I was just another responsibility to manage? "You're sweet," I said, and our eyes held for a moment longer than strictly professional. "Zuleika, can I see you for a minute?" I turned to find my supervisor, Margaret, standing behind me with a concerned expression. My heart jumped. Had she overheard our conversation? "Of course," I said, following her to her office. Margaret closed the door and gestured for me to sit down. She was a woman in her 50s, who'd been with the company for 20 years, and she'd always been fair with me. I wanted to talk to you about something that's come to my attention, she said, settling behind her desk. My mouth went dry. Okay. There's been some talk around the office about you and Aidan Sutter. Nothing specific, just observations about how much time you two spend together, how friendly you've become. I felt my cheeks burn. We work together frequently. Claims and administration have a lot of overlap. I know that, Margaret said gently, and I'm not saying anything inappropriate has happened. I'm just saying that appearances matter, especially in a workplace, and especially when one party is married. The word married felt like a slap. I would never— I'm not accusing you of anything, Margaret interrupted. I'm just suggesting that you might want to be a little more mindful of how things look. Office gossip has a way of taking on a life of its own. I nodded, feeling like a teenager who'd been caught passing notes in class. I understand. Good. You're a valuable employee, Zuleika, and I'd hate to see anything jeopardize that. I walked back to my desk feeling humiliated and angry. Office gossip? How dare people speculate about my personal life? And what business was it of theirs anyway? Aidan looked up as I approached, clearly reading something in my expression. Everything okay? Fine, I said curtly, then felt bad for taking my frustration out on him. Sorry, just work stuff. Want to talk about it? I was about to grab coffee from that place across the street. You could come with me, vent a little. The offer was tempting, but Margaret's warning was still ringing in my ears. I don't think that's a good idea. Because of what people might think. His voice was knowing, and I realized he'd probably heard the gossip too. Something like that. That's ridiculous, he said, lowering his voice. We're adults. We can have coffee together without it meaning anything. But that was the problem, wasn't it? It did mean something, at least to me, and from the way Aidan was looking at me, it meant something to him too. Maybe another time, I said. He nodded, but I could see disappointment in his eyes. Sure, another time. The rest of the day dragged by. I found myself checking my phone constantly, hoping for a text from Harlan, an apology, an explanation, something to bridge the gap between us. But there was nothing. At lunch, I called Jules. How are things with Mr. Wonderful? She asked immediately. Complicated, I said, filling her in on my conversation with Margaret. So, people are noticing, Jules said. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a good thing either. I could get in trouble at work. Only if something actually happens. And maybe something should happen, Zuleika. Maybe this is the universe telling you it's time to stop playing it safe. I have children to think about. I have responsibilities. You have a life to think about too. Your life. Look, I'm not saying you should run away and join the circus. I'm just saying that maybe you should stop dismissing every opportunity for happiness because it's not perfectly convenient. After we hung up, I sat in my car thinking about what she'd said. Was that what I was doing? Dismissing opportunities for happiness? I thought about Harlan sleeping in the guest room, about his careful questions and watchful eyes. I thought about the way Aidan made me feel. Attractive, interesting, alive. I thought about my friend's words. You deserve someone who appreciates all of that. Maybe they were right. Maybe I did deserve more than a marriage that felt like a business partnership. Maybe I deserved passion and excitement, and someone who looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Please check the shared calendar for an important appointment tomorrow. H. I frowned. Why was Harlan texting from a different number? And what appointment was he talking about? I opened our shared calendar app, but there was nothing new there. Just the usual kid activities and routine appointments. A chill ran down my spine. Something was happening, something I didn't understand. And for the first time, I wondered if my husband knew more about my feelings than I'd realized. The next day started normally enough. Harlan was gone again before I woke up, but this time he'd left a note. Taking Maya to soccer practice after school. Benji has chess club until 5. We'll grab dinner out. It was practical, informative, and completely devoid of warmth, just like everything else in our marriage had become. I was still thinking about the cryptic text when I arrived at work. Aidan was waiting by my desk with 2 coffee cups and an apologetic smile. "Peace offering," he said, holding out one of the cups. "I thought about what happened yesterday, and I realized I might have put you in an awkward position. I don't want to cause problems for you." The gesture was sweet, and I found myself softening despite my reservations. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful. I was wondering if you'd like to grab lunch today. Somewhere off-site, away from prying eyes, just 2 friends having a conversation." The word friends felt deliberately casual, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he meant more than that. And despite Margaret's warning, despite my guilt about the kids, despite everything, I found myself nodding. "That sounds nice." We went to a small cafe about 10 minutes away from the office. It was busy enough that we blended in, but quiet enough that we could actually talk. Aidan chose a corner table, and I found myself sitting closer to him than strictly necessary. "So," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee, "want to tell me what's really going on? You've seemed stressed lately." The concern in his voice was genuine, and I felt something inside me crack open. When was the last time someone had asked about my feelings and actually wanted to hear the answer? "Marriage stuff," I said, then immediately felt guilty for discussing Harlan with another man. "Want to talk about it?" I hesitated. This felt like a line I shouldn't cross, but the sympathy in Aidan's eyes was so different from Harlan's careful neutrality, and I was so tired of keeping everything inside. "We had a fight the other night," I said, "about how distant we've become, about how we never really talk anymore." "That must be hard," Aidan said, "being married to someone who doesn't really see you." The phrase hit me like a physical blow. "That's exactly it," I said, leaning forward. "He doesn't see me. He sees the mother of his children, the woman who manages the household, but he doesn't see me." "His loss," Aidan said, his hand moving across the table to cover mine. "You're an incredible woman, Zuleika. Smart, funny, beautiful. Any man would be lucky to have your attention." His thumb traced across my knuckles, and I felt electricity shoot up my arm. This was dangerous territory, but I didn't pull away. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd made different choices," I said. "If I'd waited for someone who really appreciated me instead of settling for safe and stable." "It's not too late," Aidan said quietly. "You're 32, not 92. You have your whole life ahead of you. I have children. I have responsibilities. You have a right to be happy too." The words hung between us, loaded with possibility. I knew I should pull my hand away, should change the subject, should remember that I was a married woman having lunch with a single man who was looking at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever had. Instead, I turned my palm up so our fingers could intertwine. "Aidan," I said, but I wasn't sure what I was going to say next. "I know this is complicated," he said. "I know you have a lot to figure out, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." The promise sent a thrill through me that I hadn't felt in years. This beautiful, charming man wanted me, not the efficient administrator or the responsible mother, but me. "I should get back," I said, but I made no move to leave. "In a minute," he said, his thumb still tracing patterns on my hand. "Tell me something about yourself that no one else knows." The request was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with physical touch. "I used to write poetry," I said, "terrible, angsty poetry about love and loss and the meaning of life. I filled notebooks with it in college. What happened to it? Real life happened. Marriage, kids, mortgages. Poetry doesn't pay the bills. Maybe not, but it feeds the soul. Do you ever miss it?" "Every day," I admitted, surprised by the honesty of my answer. "Maybe you should start again. Maybe it's time to feed your soul." The conversation felt more intimate than anything I'd shared with Harlan in months. When we finally walked back to the office, I felt like I was glowing from the inside out, but the glow faded quickly when I saw Margaret waiting by my desk with a grim expression. Zuleika, I need to see you again. Now. This time she didn't close the door to her office. She didn't even ask me to sit down. I thought we had an understanding yesterday, she said, her voice cold, about maintaining appropriate workplace relationships. We just had lunch, I said, but even to my own ears it sounded defensive. You just had lunch at Romano's Cafe on 5th Street, where you held hands and gazed into each other's eyes like teenagers. Don't look surprised. This is a small business community, Zuleika. People talk. My face burned with embarrassment and anger. You had me followed. I didn't have to. 3 different people called to tell me they'd seen you. People who know you're married, who know your husband, who are concerned about what they witnessed. The words hit me like physical blows. People who knew Harlan, people who might tell him what they'd seen. Nothing happened, I said weakly. Something is happening, Margaret corrected, and it needs to stop. Now. I'm putting you on notice, Zuleika. Any further reports of inappropriate behavior with Aidan Sutter will result in disciplinary action, up to and including termination. Do I make myself clear? Crystal, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Good. And Zuleika, you might want to think about what you're risking here. Your job, your reputation, your family. Is it really worth it? I walked back to my desk on shaking legs. Aidan looked up as I approached, clearly reading the distress on my face. What happened? We can't do this anymore, I said quietly. Whatever this is, it has to stop. Zuleika, please, I interrupted. Just, please. The rest of the day was torture. I could feel people watching me, whispering, judging. By 5 o'clock, I felt like I was drowning in shame and confusion. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with questions. What did I want? What was I willing to risk? What kind of person was I becoming? The house was empty when I arrived. Harlan had taken the kids to dinner as promised. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the note he'd left that morning, and tried to figure out how my life had become so complicated. My phone buzzed with a text from Jules. How's the office romance going? Before I could respond, another text came through from an unknown number. Check your email. H. With trembling fingers, I opened my laptop and logged into my personal email account. There was a message from Harlan with the subject line, "We need to talk." The message contained a single sentence. I know about lunch today. My blood turned to ice. How could he know? Who had told him? But even as the questions raced through my mind, a part of me felt almost relieved. The pretending was over. Whatever happened next, at least I wouldn't have to keep living this double life. I heard the garage door opening and knew my family was home. In a few minutes, I would have to face my husband and my children and figure out how to explain the unexplainable. How had everything gotten so out of control so quickly? The kids burst through the door first, chattering about dinner and homework, their voices a stark contrast to the dread pooling in my stomach. Maya ran up to hug me, her small arms wrapping around my waist, and I held her tighter than usual, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Mommy, we had pizza and Daddy let me get extra cheese," she announced proudly. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I managed, my eyes finding Harlan over her head. He was standing in the doorway, watching me with that same careful expression I'd noticed the night before. But now there was something else there too, a kind of sad resignation that made my chest tight. "Kids, go get started on your homework," he said quietly. "Your mum and I need to talk." Benji looked between us with those 2 knowing eyes. "Are you getting divorced?" The blunt question hung in the air like a bomb. Maya's grip on me tightened, and I felt her small body tense with fear. "Nobody's getting divorced," I said quickly, though the words felt like lies in my mouth. "We just need to discuss some grown-up things." "That's what Tommy's parents said before his dad moved out," Benji said matter-of-factly. "They had lots of grown-up discussions." Harlan knelt down to Benji's level, his voice gentle but firm. "Son, I know things feel uncertain right now, but whatever happens between your mom and me, We both love you and Maya very much. That will never change. It was such a careful, honest response, so typically Harlan, and it made me feel even worse about everything. The kids reluctantly headed upstairs, Maya casting worried glances back at us. When we were alone, Harlan and I stood in our kitchen like strangers, the weight of 8 years of marriage and 2 children and countless shared dreams hanging between us. "So," he said finally, "Romano's cafe." My mouth went dry. "How did you— Does it matter?" He pulled out his phone and set it on the counter between us. "I've gotten 3 calls today from people who care about our family. People who thought I should know that my wife was holding hands with another man in public." The shame was overwhelming. "Harlan, I can explain." "Can you?" His voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath it now. "Can you explain why you're having intimate lunches with a coworker? Can you explain why you've been working late so often? Can you explain why you look at your phone like it's the most important thing in your life?" Each question felt like a slap. "It's not what you think." "What I think," he said, "is that my wife is having an emotional affair. At minimum." The words "at minimum" hung in the air like an accusation. "I haven't slept with him," I said, and immediately hated how defensive I sounded. "Yet," Harlan said, "you haven't slept with him yet." The yet was like a punch to the gut because we both knew it was true. If things had continued, if we hadn't been caught, would I have crossed that line too? "I don't know," I whispered, and it was the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. Harlan nodded like I'd confirmed something he already knew. "At least you're being truthful now." "I never meant for this to happen," I said, tears starting to blur my vision. "I never meant to hurt you or the kids." "But you did mean to pursue it," he said. "You made choices, Zuleika, deliberate choices. You chose to have personal conversations with him. You chose to have lunch with him. You chose to hold his hand. Each you chose felt like a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I was lonely," I said desperately. "I felt invisible in my own life. He made me feel seen, appreciated." "So this is my fault?" Harlan's voice rose slightly for the first time. "I'm to blame for your affair because I didn't compliment you enough?" "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" "Because I'm trying to understand how we went from having a difficult conversation to you dating another man." "I'm not dating him." "What would you call it then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been building a relationship with someone else while lying to your husband about it." The accuracy of the statement was devastating. I was confused. I am confused. I don't know what I want anymore. "I do," Harlan said, and something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. "I know exactly what I want." "What?" "I want a wife who chooses me. I want a partner who works on our problems instead of running to someone else. I want someone who respects our marriage enough to fight for it." "I can be that person," I said quickly. "I can choose you. I can fight for us." "Can you?" He studied my face like he was looking for something. "Because yesterday you told me this wasn't working for you anymore. Today you had a romantic lunch with another man. What's tomorrow going to bring, Zuleika?" I didn't have an answer, and we both knew it. "I think," Harlan said slowly, "that you need to figure out what you actually want, and I think you need to do that without me and the kids being collateral damage in your journey of self-discovery." A cold fear gripped me. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm taking the kids to my mother's house for the weekend. It means you have 2 days to decide if you want to be married to me or if you want to pursue whatever this thing is with your coworker." "Harlan, you can't just take my children." "Our children," he corrected. "And yes, I can. They don't need to be here while you figure out whether their family is worth saving." The finality in his voice terrified me. "What if I choose you? What if I end things with Aiden and commit to working on our marriage?" "Then we'll work on it," he said. "But Zuleika, if you choose me, it has to be a real choice. It has to be because you want this marriage, not because it's the safe option or because you're afraid of the alternative." "And if I don't choose you?" His face was very calm, but I could see the pain in his eyes. Then we'll figure out how to co-parent effectively and move on with our lives. The conversation felt surreal, like we were discussing someone else's marriage. How had we gotten here so quickly? I need time, I said. You have the weekend, he replied. I'll pack some things for the kids and we'll leave tonight. Tonight? I'm not leaving them here to witness whatever breakdown you're having, Zuleika. They've been through enough already. The criticism stung because it was fair. Maya and Benji had been watching our marriage disintegrate for weeks, and I'd been too caught up in my own drama to protect them from it. Can I say goodbye? Of course. I went upstairs to find the kids in their respective rooms. Maya was coloring at her little desk, but I could tell she'd been crying. Benji was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Daddy says we're having a sleepover at Grandma Lillian's, Maya said without looking up from her coloring book. That's right. Won't that be fun? Is it because you and Daddy are fighting? The question broke my heart. Daddy and I need some time to work through some problems, I said carefully. But it has nothing to do with you and Benji. You didn't do anything wrong. Are you going to get divorced like Tommy's parents? I knelt down beside her chair, turning her to face me. I don't know what's going to happen, sweetheart, but no matter what, Daddy and I will always love you more than anything in the world. It wasn't the reassurance she wanted, but it was the only honest answer I could give. Benji was harder. When I knocked on his door, he didn't look at me. I know this is scary, I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. I know you don't understand what's happening. I understand, he said quietly. You don't want to be married to Dad anymore. The simple statement was like a knife to the chest. It's more complicated than that. No, it's not, he said, finally looking at me with eyes that seemed far too old for his 10-year-old face. You either want to be married to him or you don't. Everything else is just excuses. Out of the mouths of babes, I watched Harlan pack their bags with quiet efficiency, and I felt like I was watching my life disintegrate in real time. When they were ready to leave, Maya hugged me tight and whispered, I love you, Mummy. I love you too, baby girl. Benji's hug was more perfunctory, but he held on just a little longer than usual. Harlan was the last one out the door. I'll call you Sunday evening, he said. We can talk about what happens next. Harlan, I said, but I didn't know how to finish the sentence. I know, he said sadly. I know. And then they were gone, and I was alone in our house with nothing but my thoughts and the weight of the choices I'd made. I sat in our empty kitchen and cried until I had no tears left. Then I picked up my phone and texted Aiden. Can we talk? Aiden agreed to meet me at a coffee shop across town, neutral territory, away from our office, and the neighborhood where I might run into people who knew Harlan. I arrived first, choosing a corner table where we could talk privately, my hands shaking as I ordered a latte I knew I wouldn't drink. When he walked in 20 minutes later, I was struck again by how handsome he was. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that easy confidence that had drawn me to him in the first place. But tonight, for the first time, I found myself comparing him to Harlan. Where Aiden was flashy, Harlan was steady. Where Aiden was charming, Harlan was genuine. You look upset, Aiden said, sliding into the chair across from me. What happened? Harlan knows, I said simply. About lunch yesterday. About us. Aiden's face went carefully blank. What exactly does he know? That we've been having intimate conversations, that we held hands, that I'm involved with you emotionally. Involved, he repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling this? Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. What would you call it? Aiden looked up from his coffee, voice soft. I thought we were just flirting, Zuleika. Fun. I didn't know you'd taken it this far. The words punched the air from my lungs. Fun? You're married. You have kids. I like you. God, I really like you. But I'm not the guy who breaks up a family. Yesterday, he'd whispered any man would be lucky. Today, I was drama he didn't want. So, if I left Harlan, I said, you'd what? Disappear? He winced. Probably, I'm sorry. I never promised more. He hadn't. Not once. I'd built castles out of compliments and late-night texts, while he'd just been passing time with a lonely married woman. I drove home hollowed out. The house was too quiet. No kids, no Harlan, just the echo of my own stupidity staring back from every family photo. Jules called. I told her everything. "What do you want now?" she asked. "Him," I said, meaning Harlan. "Them. Us. Before I turned into someone I don't recognize." Sunday night the phone rang at 7 sharp. "Have you decided?" Harlan asked. "I choose you," I said, crying. "I choose us. Please." Long silence. Counseling. New job. No contact with him. "Ever," he said, voice flat, exhausted. "And Zuleika, this is the last time. Next time I leave, and I take the kids." "I know, I swear I know." "We'll be home tomorrow." He hung up. I sat in the dark, holding the phone, terrified and grateful, and already grieving the trust I'd murdered. Some cracks never closed completely, but they were coming home, and I would spend the rest of my life earning the right to open that door for them. Tomorrow the real work began.